Original French Bulldog colors. History of the French Bulldog, its founders, and the dogs they fancied.
We can learn everywhere and from everyone. It is therefore the science of others that we offer to our readers under the title, The French Bulldog, Its Origin, Its History, Its Breeding, with the hope to interest them and also to be of service to them. This book is both written for novices and for those who have experience with the French Bulldog. Waldner Comminges, 1933.
Sir, he's a good dog and a fair dog. Can more be said? William Shakespeare, as quoted on the French Bulldog magazine, Issue 1, 1913, edited by Mary Winthrop Turner.
It is hoped that the strong preference for dark brindles, some of them hardly distinguishable from black without the closest inspection, may take a turn in favor of the variegated and more pronounced brindle specimens, as the latter colors are much more in harmony with history of the breed than the so-called dark brindle that now seems so much desired by French Bulldog fanciers in this country. Nothing could be so effective or a more pleasant sight than to see a ring full of French Bulldogs, varying in color, instead of an assembly of dogs that show so little brindle color as to impress spectators, as being wholly black. Such a variance in color would surely add to the attractiveness of the exhibit, such as is impossible with such little variation in color as now prevails when French Bulldogs are shown. The French Bulldog, published in 1926 by the French Bulldog Club of America and the French Bulldog Club of New England. Edited by O. F. Vetter, FBDCA founding member and judge, page 262 and 263.
The whys and wherefores of these disqualifications, so far as we know, have not been thoroughly explained, but no doubt there is some definite objection, and objection that started in the case of the British Bulldog, the bedrock from which both the French Bulldog and Boston Terriers sprang. Freeman Lloyd, editor of Dogdom magazine, 1921.
The first gray, chocolate, and even tan-pointed French Bulldogs are well documented in the AKC Stud book registrations, now publicly available to be viewed and verified through the Library of Congress and various universities that have digitized these documents. Our team of researchers, headed by former Kennel Club French Bulldog president Penny Rankine Parsons, along with Andy Dan, audited these stud book records and documented the coat colors of these historic foundation dogs. We personally reviewed tens of thousands of stud book registrations from as early as 1897, as well as multiple pedigrees and online pedigree databases, to put together a dynamic view of the historic French Bulldogs, their colors, and their offspring. Our research was presented to the Kennel Club in London in February 2022 and was officially accepted into their library. Over 8,500 historic French Bulldogs were manually added to the public domain online pedigree databases where none previously existed. Each pedigree was entered with supporting documentation, such as screen captures of stud book records and text describing details such as registration number, whelp date, parents, owners, breeders, and yes, color. Unlike registrations in the UK stud books, the AKC stud books clearly recorded the colors of these dogs, revealing exactly how many early French Bulldogs were visibly expressing a phenotype for coat colors that requires 2 copies of recessive genes that must each be inherited from both parents. This brown brindle, whelped in 1951, was sired by champion Hollyoaks Nouvelle Gérie, making him an automatic carrier of the recessive gene responsible for brown French Bulldogs. Hollyoaks Nouvelle Gérie also happens to be the sire of famed FBDCA multiple specialty winner, Champion Bouquet Nouvelle Amie, meaning his sire had a 50% chance of passing that gene for brown to him as well. But you'd never see it expressed in his own coat, because the gene that makes French Bulldog creams will cover nearly every other coat color and pattern, cloaking the otherwise visible colors, if homozygous. So when you see a record, such as a stud advertisement in a 1903 breeder magazine, such as L'Éleveur in Paris, by a man cited as one of the first breeders of French Bulldogs, Monsieur Albuy, self-describing his champion French Bulldog, Rabot de Beaubourg, as gris fer de fonce, which translates to dark iron gray. That means this dog inherited a copy of recessive gene dilute from both parents to be a gray French Bulldog, because genetically, it takes two to be blue, or gray, or brown, such as this female sired by Champion Rico, Brackenside Countess, registered as Gray Brindle. Her sire, initially owned by George N. Phelps when imported, was registered without color being given. And as controversial as this might sound, it also takes two to be genetic cream, not to be mistaken for maskless fawn. They are not the same beast, not even close, not because of how they appear or look to your eye as a phenotype, but because of how they genetically behave and express through the rules of epistasis. Genetic creams can cover almost every coat color and pattern, such as brindle, or the tan points on a gray or brown French Bulldog. The only pattern creams can't hide is piebald. Genetic cream is effectively a cloaking device, and in 1947, the breed standard was changed to allow light-colored eyes and noses on light dogs, something not usually needed on creams that are not homozygous carriers of dilute or cocoa. The standard exception has been in place to compensate for dilution, as demonstrated in the FBDCA Judge's Guide, complete with photos. And upon close inspection, those early creams shown and championed between 1947 to 1980 had a lot of confirmed registered brown brindles behind them, line-bred top and bottom. But back to rabbit holes. Rabot de Beaubourg, celebrated for his breed type with the hotly chased feature of straight or bat ears, is described by his breeder and original owner, Monsieur Albuy, a founding breeder and officer of the original French Bulldog breed club, as dark iron gray, that immediately flags both his sire and dam as automatically carrying the gene that makes French Bulldogs gray, the dilute gene. Further, when you take a close look at those photos of the infamous godfather of all French Bulldogs, Rabot de Beaubourg, one can only start to notice the paleness of his coat. And then there's this. Turns out, Monsieur Charles Petit, owner of Rabot de Beaubourg, self-described the world's most famous and most celebrated sires of all French Bulldogs as iron gray. Not gray brindle either, just flat outright iron gray. So that grayness you're seeing in those older photos is exactly what it looks like. Gray. Iron gray, just like his litter mate, Pitou, referred to in America as Pitou de Paris, maternal grandsire to American champion Nel Cote Gamin, sire of over 148 documented offspring and a cornerstone of the breed. It doesn't get any closer to ground zero than this. Iron gray is the native color of the French Bulldog, the color of the sire that nearly every modern French Bulldog has descended. And if you really take a close look at Pyrrhus and Mira, both owned by Charles Maunet in 1899, with Pyrrhus being the sire of the celebrated dark brindle, Champion Dimbula, it's clear that Pyrrhus is a very pale dog, especially with the absence of brindle, such as that of his son shown here. Pyrrhus was sold by Maunet for 2,000 francs to the Marquis de Saint-Vallier about the same time as Dimbula. Dimbula was sold to Monsieur Charles Deneath for 7,500 francs. Mr. Charles Hopton, owner of Rodney Kennels, later introduced the importation of Dimboola to America, where he was purchased by railroad heiress Mrs. Harry C. Gillig, a.k.a. Amy Crocker, a.k.a. the Queen of Bohème, the most fantastic woman of her age. Amy Crocker, the first high society woman to sport tattoos, in public, with her fiancé's name, before she was completely divorced, the first time, which she did 4 times total, marrying 5 times, every 10 years, each time to a man aged 26, author of And I'd Do It Again. That Amy Crocker. So now you know a little more about Amy, the owner of the winner of the very first FBDCA specialty, who helped bring eyes to this new breed among high society, lending to its quick popularity among the 400 of New York's Knickerbocker elite. But back to Pyrrhus and Mira. Take a really close look at that nose leather. It's not black, not a smidge. That's the key to recognizing the presence of homozygous recessive genes for skin and coat color in French Bulldogs. And that is why it matters, over 127 years later, who these foundation French Bulldogs were, because pedigrees and the genes behind them matter. Especially in an extremely tight gene pool where individuals with desired traits were being closely bred, line-bred, and inbred to achieve breed type in the shortest possible time so that they could be sold to America's millionaires and the elite society of New York, the infamous 400. Pedigrees matter, and the individuals who carried those genes, celebrated champions who sired hundreds and then thousands of offspring, distributing these sometimes recessive genes to their offspring at a potential rate of 50% each and every time. That's why it matters. When breeders discovered that if they bred a genetic cream, which we now know is homozygous recessive red, to another cream, you will always get cream. They did that. And at one point, there were only 100 individuals registered as French Bulldogs in the AKC. Pedigrees matter. The genes an individual inherits from their parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, they all matter. Just like why the society elite of New York, known as the 400, cared about who they came from hundreds of years later, paying particular attention to whether or not their ancestors could be traced to the passengers of the Mayflower. It absolutely 100% matters, 127 years later, who the foundation dogs of the French Bulldog were, and what genes they carried, and what genes they passed forward. In a small, tight gene pool. That's the why. Until these findings were recently published, the common mantra has been that these colors may have existed, but they were far and few between. Further, preservationists maintain that the original, naturally occurring colors, such as gray, brown, and tan points, have been purposely bred out, which is highly unlikely considering the depth, breadth, and widespread distribution of these genes from the very beginning, in fact, ground zero, of this 127-year-old breed. Many preservationists further claim that any modern French Bulldog today can only be a non-breed standard, NBS color, if it is an outcross, usually applying the term mongrel or mutt. Except that purebred French Bulldogs, such as Holly Lane's No Regrets, registered as fawn and black, sired by FBDCA Best of Breed, champion Edward Player Puck, was good enough to be bred twice, and her entire second litter of 2 was purchased by James Dalton, famed owner of the Fablehaft program. Both offspring were shown, championed, and bred by Dalton, who clearly had no problem with the black and tan color of Holly Lane's No Regrets, though now he's a spokesperson for FBDCA and AKC. Further, our team uncovered little-known newspaper and magazine articles that are also available online, either through subscription or public domain, where additional photographs and content were added to support statements regarding self-reported colors by breeders and owners. Many of the owners and breeders of these gray, brown, and tan Frenchies are celebrated pioneers of this breed, including judges and even French Bulldog Club presidents, such as FBDCA President Frédéric Paffé of La France Kennels, renowned for their FBDCA specialty winners and champions, and also for their seal and mahogany brindles, and yes, the occasional brown brindle. We also managed to trace the very first AKC registered creams, meaning genetically homozygous recessive red, which until now were believed to have originated in the UK, but when fact-checked, all evidence points to America first, despite what is publicly posted on the FBDCA sites about the origins of cream. Arriving in the United States circa 1940s through Amanda West's imports. They are actually recorded as being developed in parallel in both countries, identified originally as all white, later referred to as cream as early as 1931, which multiple first and second generation gray, blue, and tan parents, grandparents, and offspring. This is the first AKC registered cream French Bulldog, Piccolo d'Amourette, whelped June 4, 1931, bred by Amourette Kennels. She is sired by Nejus d'Amourette out of Mouchette d'Amourette. She is tightly line-bred on both paternal and maternal sides, with multiple appearances of Champion Peter's Coué, Champion Pourquoi Peter, bred by Edwin Kaufman, and Gammon's Yoko, a son of Champion Gammon's rival, by Champion Pourquoi Pas, sired by Champion Nelcote Gammon. This brings forward multiple instances of these famous sires, with over 9 appearances of Champion Pourquoi Pas and his sire, Champion Nelcote Gammon. As you'll see later in this presentation, this pedigree is full of dilute and cocoa carriers, such as Champion Gammon's rival, who sired Brown Brindle, Bonita II. His sire, Champion Pourquoi Pas, sired Brown Brindle, Rowdy II, and then Grey Brindle, Madame Nichette. One early illustration from 1849 shows the 20-pounder Nottingham Frank. To the casual observer, this blue and white pied dog with upright ears bears more resemblance to a French bulldog than a bulldog. It is from dogs such as this that the modern Frenchie descended. Anne M. Hier.
If we want to know the origin of the breeding of the Bulldog in France, we must go back to the origin of the dogs which have been talked about and which we know with certainty through those who bred them or seen them raised. Currently, many of these old enthusiasts have disappeared. Others live secluded and are difficult to reach. But I had the good fortune to be in contact with Mr. Charles Roger, and during our friendly conversations, I noted many points of breeding that have always remained unclear. Current breeders and former judges will agree with me that no one was better qualified than Mr. Charles Roger to provide me with the clarification I needed on the beginnings of the Bulldog breed in Paris. An excellent connoisseur and breeder, he judged the breed for several years at the Tuileries Dog Show. Waldner Comminges, 1933.
First French Bulldog Club, founded by a few amateurs before having been recognized by the Société Centrale Canine. Charles Roger, President. So where did it all start? From the very beginning of this breed, directly from Paris, with 2 full siblings imported and registered as Gray and Iron Gray, out of Coco by Bach and Pepe, by Paulus. They are documented as being born in 1900 and 1903, arriving in America just in time for this new breed's popularity and scarcity to rise among society's elite with the efforts of early importers, such as George N. Phelps.
Owing to the extreme scarcity of good specimen of this breed in Paris, the French toy bulldog will always be exclusive. The typical dog should have the prick or tulip ear, which distinguishes him from any other breed. I was one of the first to introduce the French Bulldog to America. Due to the Commune of 1870, the case of the bulldog in France was precarious. The dogs had to be self-sufficient, but there is a breed of small dogs in France with a distinct type of their own, and these dogs are only found in France. That's why the American club called this dog French Bulldog. It is as so separate a branch of the English Bulldog as they are of Spaniels or Setters. However, we claim that the upright ears are the Bulldog's primitive ears, which have been modified into shelf ears and tulip ears. George N. Phelps, Vice President, French Bulldog Club of America, 1897.
First AKC registered gray French Bulldog, 1900.
Boulette 4 was owned by Charles Keogh of New York City, imported from Parisian breeder, Monsieur Adolphe. Because she is clearly described as gray and her full sibling as iron gray, this tells us important information about her sire and dam, Coco and Pepe. Coco, by Bach. This foundation sire from Paris, France, was owned by Monsieur Adolphe and was whelped circa 1897. This dog sired two very important French bulldogs who were imported to the United States, with Boulot 2 shown and campaigned by Bert Sanford of Westchester, New York. Offspring and full siblings, Boulette 4 and Boulot 2, are of key interest because they are clearly registered as gray and iron gray, with zero reference to brindle at all. This removes all doubt of whether or not the dogs are truly gray, homozygous dilute, DD, or if a breeder mistakenly registered a standard brindle as gray brindle, or even silver brindle. What some preservationist breeders maintain is a mistake made by these experienced breeders and competitors trying to describe the background coat behind the brindle pattern. Except these same breeders somehow manage to register other puppies, even within the same litter, as just brindle. And then there are the self-described iron gray foundation stock, who were not even brindle, and they are directly behind those silver and gray brindles. Or when someone lost their French Bulldog, named Beau, in 1902, and placed an advertisement describing it as gray-blue color in the Morning Post. These are the colors that breeders, owners, artists, and authors witnessed and described on the French Bulldogs in their lives. A recently discovered photograph of Coco's paternal grandsire and maternal great-grandsire, Tack, 1895, shows a rather pale brindle dog. Considering that Coco was line-bred to this dog on both paternal and maternal sides and carried the gene necessary to create both gray and iron gray, Tack could have been behind this gene. In addition to Monsieur Albois, Monsieur Roger and Monsieur Adolphe, another foundation breeder, was also importing French Bulldogs to America in 1900. Félix Fèvre, a well-known Parisian who brokered this new breed to his wealthy elite clients.
Monsieur Félix Fèvre, early breeder and importer of French Bulldogs, The New York Herald, 4th of January 1904. You ask me as to prices. Mine are as follows. For dogs or beep who have recovered from the distemper, that is to say about 1 year old and weighing under 16 pounds, I ask from 1,000 to 1,500 franc, and for heavyweights, from 26 pounds to 30 pounds, 500 franc, and upwards is the price. For good-looking, but what I consider imperfect animals, I accept lower figures. My breed has taken prize after prize, not only here, but abroad. At the present moment, my principal stud dog is Phoebus by Marteau de Levallois and Margot, for which I have refused 3,000 francs. I am sorry that I cannot give you his portrait, But here are the photographs of Polo, 15 months old, weighs 25 pounds, by Marteau de Levallois and Margot. Petite, 3 years old, 19 pounds, by Marteau de Levallois and Miss, and who won the principal grand prize at the 1901 show. Also Dazuth, a 5-year-old female, weighing 16 pounds, which is also a prize winner. These are nearly perfect animals. The famous stallion Brennus is now in the United States, and his progeny are making names for themselves. Monsieur Boutru tells you that the legs should be straight. I maintain that they should be slightly bowed. He also says, so you tell me, that the tail should taper to a point. My idea of a bull's tail is that it should be corkscrewed, that is, naturally broken. There is, by the by, an idea current that the bulldog's tail is artificially broken soon after its birth. There is one man in Paris who spent months in trying to fake the broken tail. His trick was soon discovered, and he has lost caste.
And you find that bulldog breeding pays its way?
Yes, for although money is not overabundant just now, I keep on selling and am constantly refusing offers. And just tell Monsieur Dufour that when a woman wants a thing, she will have it. And that's with the little purebred, ugly-looking bulls are coming into vogue here, and as you say, are going to have their day.
And now for some chit-chat anent these entries. I saw M. Fever's big French bull, Bill, yesterday. His owner, a short time ago, described him to me as being the ugliest toad-faced animal that he had ever bred. I believe him. For a real crushed masked, I have never seen his equal.
Another key foundation breeder, exhibitor and early importer was Charles Maunet, breeder of Pyrrhus, the sire of Champion Dimbula. Charles Maunet is recorded as selling his dogs to early enthusiasts, such as George Krell, editor of the Stockkeeper magazine. Krell owned St. Crispin, Leda, and Monarch. Krell's collaboration with Maunet marks the beginning of this breed and the first exhibitions of these dogs, both as rose-eared and straight, or bat-eared. Charles Maunet is the breeder behind Mignon, owned by FBDCA Secretary Eloise Pulsifer. The AKC records show Mignon as a light brindle whelped in 1899, sired by Zola, with Zola by Bach out of Olga. Maunet also bred Andrew Tyner's Follette, shown in 1899. The sire on record is Maunet's stud, Pyrrhus, who, if you take a closer look, is notably pale with light nose leather. Other notable productions are the beautiful Piebald, Marjolaine, as well as Zazette and Kiki Marquise. AKC Stud book records show Maunet is the breeder of Radium, Naquette III. French archives show Maunet is the breeder of 1891's Coco, and later, a dog named Bach. And most importantly, he is the breeder behind Zola. Zola by Bach. Owned and shown by Andrew Tyner, Zola was imported from Paris, bred by Charles Maunet. He is recorded as having sired over 38 offspring, including AKC-registered Grey Brindle, Trilby. AKC number 97019 was bred by Andrew Tyner, whelped circa 1903. This makes Zola, sire of 38 known offspring, a carrier of Dilute, the gene that makes Grey French Bulldogs. Harpden Crib. Color, chocolate brindle. Source, Cruft's catalog at Kennel Club Library. Notice the faintly visible tan points on the ankles and cheeks, the signature of Trindle. He is listed by his owner as a chocolate brindle, making him homozygous for the gene that makes a visible brown dog, most likely Coco. Discovered by researchers at VetGen in 2020, Coco is an exclusive mutation in French Bulldogs. not to be confused with liver, which is on the B locus. By default, any visibly brown or chocolate French Bulldog is either homozygous for cocoa or B locus, making both parents automatic carriers, at minimum. All offspring will automatically be carriers. Nini, by Rip. This 1902 gray brindle French Bulldog was bred by Léon Reynaud, the same owner of the imported gray and iron gray siblings, Boulette 4 and Boulot 2, and the breeder of Zazette. Reynaud owned her dilute-carrying sire, Rip, as well. Reynaud and his partner Conlin were also behind famous dogs, such as Marquis. They, too, had a French Bulldog named Bach. However, it is not clear which one, as there are multiple sires registered as Bach, identified by their sire and dam. Nini was listed as the property of Aquahung Farm Kennels, owned by FBDCA founder and early French Bulldog importer William Lennox. Lennox was the judge at the 1912 FBDCA specialty.
At the bench of the noted Salvolatile, Mr. Lennox heartily exclaimed, "There is the type." Further around the aisle was Peak, a gray brindle on exhibition only, which Mr. Lennox wished to buy. Dogdom Magazine, Volume 14, 1913.
Her name was Margot de Pantin, whelped September 3, 1904, imported from Paris, bred by foundation breeder, competitor, and judge Gabriel Billon. And like many foundation French Bulldogs, Margot de Pantin was described by her breeders as dark iron gray, and she was the first documented dilute French Bulldog to earn her AKC championship title in 1908. How, you ask? Well, the FBDCA didn't always discriminate against color. In fact, before Samuel L. Goldenberg managed to convince the then 14-year-old French Bulldog Club of America to make his prime competitor's dog a disqualification, DQ, in the show ring, posing himself as an international French Bulldog authority representing France, he'd actually been fired for undermining the FBDCA's standard used to allow all colors, all brindles, and forbade discrimination of coat color. Owned by Clifford H. Cook of San Francisco, Margot de Pantin was imported in 1905 and later co-owned and shown to championship with brother-in-law Sterling Postley, the famous lawyer for the Singer Sewing Machine Company. Described as a man of leisure, Margot de Pantin's co-owner, Sterling Postley, was a renowned, several times divorced millionaire, including from Cook's sister Ethel, who came from a family line that traced back to the founders of New York. Postley owned other French Bulldogs, including the notable Vivace, a stud sired by Rocambole, bred by Charles Roger of Paris. The same Charles Roger, president of the French Bulldog Club in Paris, who had the iron gray foundation stock described earlier, such as the maternal grandsire of Champion Nelcote Gamin by Champion Richelieu out of Maricel. For this iron gray dog to produce iron gray puppies means that the dam of these offspring was also carrying the gene responsible for iron gray, indicating that the gene pool of the foundation stock was saturated with carriers, as well as visibly dilute French Bulldogs. Margot de Pantin was also the first French Bulldog to give birth to a litter of 5 in San Francisco in 1908. However, she unfortunately died in whelp. Her litter was sired by Champion General de la Mer, and the litter survived.
Flowers for Margot de Pantin's grave. French champion bulldog dies of peritonitis, leaving family of puppies to setter's care. Margot de Pantin is dead. Despite the efforts of a veterinary who was in constant attendance for 24 hours, the famous French champion bull succumbed to peritonitis. Clifford G. Cook, the well-known fancier, who has a big cabinet full of trophies the animal won whenever she was shown, abroad and in all the cities on the Pacific coast, feels his loss keenly. Margot de Pantin is buried in a little grave that a Japanese maid visits daily and strews with flowers while 5 3-days-old puppies are being reared by a Gordon setter that takes kindly to her foster children.
Of the 5 puppies, 4 are easily identified in the AKC Stud books and show records. The sire, also owned by Cook and Postley, Champion General de la Mer, was bred in Paris May 15, 1904, by foundation breeder M. Ruffier. He was sired by Champion Dick de la Mer, out of Follette de la Mer. 2 of the puppies, Mimsy and Baptiste, were purchased by Mrs. Timothy Hopkins of Menlo Park, California. They were described as mahogany brindle and light brindle, all offspring of iron gray Margot de Pantin, by default, carried at least 1 or more copies of the gene responsible for gray or blue French Bulldogs. Dilute. Margot de Pantin was a granddaughter of Rocambole, a straight-eared French Bulldog weighing over 10 kilos, owned and shown by Charles Roger, owner of several Gray and Mouse Foundation French Bulldogs. Before Roger, Rocambole had been shown by Mr. Jacquelin at the Tuileries Canine Exhibition in 1901. Margot's breeder, Gabriel Billon, lived at 1 Rue Jean-Nicot in Pantin, hence the kennel name of de Pantin. Gabriel Billon also owned many other famous early French Bulldogs, such as Bach, Marmotte, Margot, Follette, Boulot, Raguse, Modèle, and many other key foundation French Bulldogs. Gabriel Billon, owner of Margot, 1884. To better understand the gene pool of these early dogs, it's important to become familiar with the most famous and successful sires, their breeders, and how they were bred. And now, with the discovery of self-described color, such as iron gray, by their breeders, it confirms the photographs of these early foundation studs. Champion Richelieu was originally called Boulot II when he was in France, sired by Boulot by Leduc out of Diane, bred by Monsieur Billon, then purchased by Félix Fèvre. He was then imported to America by William Lennox and sold to Richard Hunt of Aquahung Kennels, who registered him as Richelieu. This famous foundation sire is also the sire of Champion Nelcote Gamin, briefly owned by Samuel L. Goldenberg, then sold to the Purdy brothers, who campaigned him to championship and studded him out to sire over 148 offspring. Champion Nelcote Gamin is often cited as the champion of all champions, and considered a cornerstone of this breed in both America and through his famous red brindle son, International Champion Hunk's Bequest, sold by breeder Mary Winthrop Turner to Mrs. Donald Armour in the UK. Nelcote Gamin's dam, Muriel, was sired by none other than Iron Grey, Pitou de Paris, making her an automatic carrier by default of the gene at minimum. It is no surprise, then, that Champion Nelcote Gamin sired several gray brindles as well as brown brindles, meaning he carried the recessive genes required to make gray or brown French Bulldogs, Dilute and Cocoa, respectively. Each of his documented 148 offspring had the potential to inherit either or both genes at a rate of 50% each, while at least 4 of his offspring were visually gray or brown, and 8 males were carriers who sired either gray or brown offspring, including champion Pourquoi Pas, champion Gamins Riquet, littermate champion Hunks Bequest, champion Gamins Rival, and champion Dr. Deluxe. 3 of those champions were FBDCA Specialty Best of Breed winners. And each of those champions sired gray and/or brown French Bulldogs, making them carriers of these recessive genes by default. That means that each of these heavily used foundation studs had a 50% chance of passing these genes to every offspring as a carrier themselves. And some of those offspring were more than just carriers. They were visibly gray or brown. This is champion Noswal Nabob, registered gray brindle, bred by AKC judge James T. Schaffner, sired by champion Nelcote Gammon out of Brackenside Loda, a daughter of champion Encliffe Athos. Champion Noswal Nabob was whelped in 1910. He is on record as the best champion, best dog, and best of opposite sex in the 1915 FBDCA specialty under Judge A. McClure Halley. Notice the number 87 listed next to each win, which was assigned to gray brindle, champion Noswal Nabob. Strangely, there is no mention of this celebrated multiple champion who attained his title in only 4 shows with stiff competition, and he is missing from the FBDCA website with historical references to past winners, as is his full brother, Dr. Deluxe. Fortunately, these 2 bios were documented in the 1926 FBDCA publication, The French Bulldog. Otherwise, these 2 full brothers champion best of breed would have disappeared entirely from the narrative. The year that gray brindle, champion Noswal Nabob, won the FBDCA specialties, including the New England Club, the cover of the catalog that year featured 2 French Bulldogs that were definitely not black or dark brindle. They are brown and without a black mask. The next year, 1916, the cover featured distinctly gray French Bulldogs, and it was repeated the next year when Samuel L. Goldenberg was the judge. Not surprisingly, advertisements with Nabob's likeness became mainstream, and gray brindles were even featured in social campaigns, such as this artist's 1915 rendition featuring a gray French Bulldog. The genes responsible for making a French Bulldog visibly appear either gray or brown are both recessive. It takes 2 copies of dilute to make a gray, or sometimes called blue, French Bulldog. The term mouse is meant to describe a dilute gray or blue fawn versus a gray or blue brindle. Basically, the same gene dilute is responsible for both mouse or blue fawn, as it is for gray or blue brindles. The only difference being the addition of K-locus KBR for brindle, making an otherwise blue fawn express as a gray brindle. Same gene for gray, but dramatically different effect. But in 1912, there is no way those who bred French Bulldogs could have known that what made mouse is what was also behind gray brindle. It also takes 2 copies of Coco to make a brown French Bulldog. This means that any French Bulldog that is visibly described as gray or brown is carrying 2 copies of that gene to express the coat color, and the only way they inherited those homozygous genes is to receive 1 copy from each parent, making both parents automatic carriers. And any visibly gray or brown French Bulldog will pass on a copy of that gene to every single offspring. And like it or not, gray and brown brindle was coveted by those who bred, judged, and sold these dogs after 1912. Yes, that's a brown brindle, whelped in 1951 by FBDCA president and foundation breeder and exhibitor Frederic Poffet of La France Kennels, winner of multiple FBDCA national specialties, and he also owned a lot of seal and seal brindles, something many preservationist breeders don't want to address. This is going to take a while because, well, there are a lot of seals in these records belonging to President Poffitt's program. But you know what they say, right? Sealing is believing. My apologies. It was too easy. If you're like many French Bulldog enthusiasts, you're probably wondering what, exactly, is a seal brindle French Bulldog. You're in luck, because we've found some modern versions that can help show the distinctive color and dorsal stripe pattern that make them very different, if not exceptionally beautiful. Hence, the reason why a seasoned, experienced breeder such as Frederick Poffitt would take the trouble and effort to distinguish the colors on some, but certainly not all of his French Bulldogs. For the record, this seal brindle French Bulldog carries only one copy of Coco, the recessive gene required to make a chocolate French Bulldog when there are two copies present. He is AYAY and carries no dilute, and only one copy of KBR, the gene required to express brindle. Bambula, AKC number 80763, whelped 15. May 1902, sire, Royal Bach, dam, Royal Beauty, color, gray brindle, source, AKC Stud Book, volume 21, page 798. Brackenside Countess, by Champion Rico, gray brindle bred by Robert MacDonald, whelped May 23, 1904. Source, AKC Stud Book, volume 23, page 1562. Sired by the famous French Bulldog champion, Rico. Brackenside Countess was owned by Robert MacDonald, owner of Brackenside Kennels. Champion Rico was imported by Shirley Marston in 1899, then sold to FBDCA founding member George N. Phelps, was a visibly pale light brindle, who sired gray brindle Brackenside Countess in 1904, making him by default a carrier of dilute D. Champion Rico's paternal grandsire was dilute D carrier, Coco, by Bach, sire of the gray and iron gray full sibling imports, Boulette 4 and Boulot 2. When you view the pedigree, it is highly likely that the gene that make gray and iron gray French Bulldogs was passed to Rico's sire, Papillon, and then passed to Rico. Keogh's Madam, brown brindle, whelped March 9, 1905, bred by Bert Sanford, sired by iron gray French Bulldog, Boulot 2. Because she is visibly brown, this means Keogh's Madam is homozygous for the gene that makes brown French Bulldogs, either Coco, which is exclusive to Frenchies, or the B locus, which is responsible for liver. This also means that Boulot 2 carried either Coco or B locus, in addition to being homozygous dilute. Irene 2, dark brown brindle, whelped June 15, 1905. Sired by Nell Cote Gugus, owned by Samuel L. Goldenberg, out of Fifi, making him a great-grandson of both dilute carrier, Zola, as well as Monsieur Ferrand's foundation sire, Lupi. Janet by Champion Sardou, light brown, whelped January 28, 1906, bred by Mrs. C. C. McCormick. Mephisto, by Endcliffe Athos, brown brindle and white, bred by Arthur Babbitt, whelped June 6, 1906. Rochelle Olga, by Ruinart Valois out of Odette, whelped August 1, 1906, bred by H. T. Foote. Notice the line breeding to Mrs. Pullisfer's champion, Maurice, on both the sire and the dam. Champion Maurice is sired by Champion Rico, who we know sired Grey Brindle, Brackenside Countess. Athos, number 1, 1, 2, 4, 3, 6. Whelped March 8, 1906, by Encliffe Athos out of Chartreuse. Grey Brindle. Bred by J. L. Murphy. The dam of Athos is Chartreuse, registered as a mixed brindle, sired by champion Rico. Athos is sired by Encliffe Athos, who was purchased by the Purdy brothers and stood at Warren Kennels.
Encliffe Athos proved to be the most wonderful sire in the country. Sire of Champion Santos, Champion Hautres, Champion Ingenue, Porthos II, Madame Fifi and many other noted ones.
With over 110 known offspring, Encliffe Athos passed his genes onto the core foundation sires and dams of this breed from 1904 to 1912, with many of those offspring siring gray and brown brindles as well. In the case of Mirth, a gray brindle daughter of Encliffe Athos, whelped in 1910, bred by the Purdy brothers, a daughter of Chartreuse, Lady Rip by champion Nelcote Gamin, was bred back to Encliffe Athos, bringing out the gray coat from her dilute-carrying parents. Boulot II, number 112316, whelped April 15, 1906, Grey Brindle, sired by Encliffe Rip Dalfort. Boulot II's dam is Mona, by dilute carrier, champion Rico. As a gray brindle, both of her parents are carriers, by default, making champion Encliffe Dalfort an automatic dilute carrier. Demery, by Zouave out of Bonny Royale, whelped November 6, 1906, Grey Brindle.
The second litter of Frenchies sired for me by Zouave out of my good female, Bonny Royale, last litter containing pups winning at Chister, Wissahickon, Atlantic City, Bryn Mawr. These pups are 2 months old, healthy, very typical, will be sold cheap, quality considered, satisfaction guaranteed. Joseph Warmoth, Dogdom Magazine.
Blue Prince, by Stainton's Niblo, whelped December 25, 1906, Blue Brindle, bred and owned by Charles L. Grimm. This is actually the first reference to a blue brindle versus a gray brindle in the AKC Stud books for French Bulldogs. However, both terms are synonymous for a homozygous dilute brindle. Stainton's Niblo was heavily advertised and used for multiple litters, potentially transferring that dilute gene to 50% or more of his offspring. Owned by Bernard Strauss. This is an example of an advertisement for Stainton's Nibluia puppies in Dogdom Magazine. Solid Silver Brindle, Beaucaire 3, whelped August 9, 1908, sired by Golden Brindle, Hunk's Bill out of Cosette, Pin 5459. This solid silver brindle was sired by Hunk's Bill, by Hunk's son. The interesting thing about this is that Hunk's son sired a blue brindle named Plon Plon. This removes all doubt that the gene that Hunk's Bill and Cosette carry, and what that is making what the breeder described Beaucaire III as solid silver brindle, is the same gene that makes a blue brindle or a gray brindle. The other key terminology used in this registration is solid silver. The reason we know that Plon Plon was a blue brindle is actually because of a famous publication by the French Bulldog Club of America itself, published in 1926. On page 55, the authors clearly describe Plon Plon, then owned by Aquahung Kennels, as a blue brindle. He was shown by his next owner, Miss Verona Jarbo, where he placed second out of 4 in the junior dog's 12 months and under 2 years of age. Yes, you heard correctly, a blue brindle was awarded, very highly commended in the 1910 French Bulldog Club of America show by Honorable Judge James Mortimer. Lady Victoria by Stainton's Niblo out of Edna. Whelped, December 25, 1906. Maltese. Of notable interest, Lady Victoria is the littermate to Blue Brindle, Blue Prince. Big Stick, whelped February 11, 1907. Mouse Color, by Napoleon Bonaparte, out of Mert, by Rocambole, out of Coquette, by Pasha, out of Rosette, Rocambole, by Rabot de Beaubourg, out of Rita. Rabot de Beaubourg, the infamous Foundation sire cited as being traced to nearly every modern French Bulldog, is the son of Iron Grey Loupy, originally owned by Monsieur Ferrand, as was Rita, and is the littermate to Iron Grey Pitou de Paris, owned by Charles Roger. It should be noted that Napoleon Bonaparte is a grandson of Tyner's Follette, sired by Pyrrhus. This is the first AKC record of a French Bulldog registered as Mouse, and interestingly, he was shown at Westminster in 1908 by his owner, George Flynn. And as luck would have it, Big Stick had a littermate named Taupe, who was also registered as Mouse Color. Source: The American Kennel Club Stud Book, January 1st December 31st, 1907, Vol 24, page 1726. Boulevard Princess Marcella, Dark Grey Brindle, by Viscount Romeo out of Princess Margarita. Whelped May 1st, 1907. Viscount Romeo by Bouquet out of Lady Rothschild, by Prince Carlo out of Juliet, Bouquet by Romeo out of Marcella. Princess Margarita was sired by Sousa, a son of Toby, bred by Monsieur Ruffier. Kiddo, by D'Anglemont Rico out of D'Anglemont Nanette, by Champion Rico, out of Reed's Ma Belle. Grey Brindle, whelped January 2nd, 1908. D'Anglemont Rico was sired by Champion Endcliffe Rip d'Alfort, out of Midget, by Rip Seu, by Rip. Felice, by Felix II, was bred by James R. McDonnell and owned by Frank Notman, brother to FBDCA Secretary Grant Notman, perhaps one of the most interesting foundation dams of the French Bulldog breed. Felice by Felix II out of Juno, by Hunk's son out of Dina Maria, stands out for several reasons. Whelped in 1908, not only was Felice by Felix II registered as dark brown, not brindle, but she was also the paternal granddaughter of Iron Grey Boulot II, making her sire, Felix II, a carrier of dilute by default, in addition to a cocoa carrier by siring brown offspring. On her maternal side, she was the granddaughter of dilute D. Carrier, Hunk's son, who sired a documented blue brindle, Plan Plan, in 1910. In addition, her maternal great-grandsire, George No. 90661, was sired by registered Grey Brindle, Bambula by Royal Bach out of Royal Beauty, making him a default carrier of dilute. As a visibly brown French Bulldog, Felice by Felix II would have been genetically homozygous cocoa, and would have passed a copy the gene that makes brown French Bulldogs to each and every offspring, including the 1911 FBDCA National Specialty winner, Champion Gammons Riquet, his littermate, Champion Hunk's Bequest, Mademoiselle Nanette, Champion Melisande, and Pourquoi Felice. Flashlight 3 of Brayburn, Dark Brown Brindle, by Hebrew of Milbourne, Mary Winthrop Turner's Stud, out of Flashlight 2, by Bimbo out of Flashlight by Champion Francois out of Fanchette. Bimbo by Dick out of Colette. Hebrew of Milbourne was sired by Mocha out of Fauvette of Milbourne. She was originally imported as Fauvette, by Foundation sire, Rabot de Beaubourg, bred by Monsieur Ruffier. Mocha was sired by Felix Ferves Brennis. Francois was owned by FBDCA founding member, Frank J. Bristol, imported from Paris, bred by Madame Lepage. Miss Wrinkles, whelped in 1909, was bred by George E. Hubbard, owner of her dam, D'Anglemont Queenie. While a bit different, her registered color of London smoke was most certainly purposeful, especially considering the color of the skies during the Industrial Revolution. Miss Wrinkles has two notable dilute carrying sires in her pedigree, Endcliffe Athos on her paternal side, and a line breeding to champion Endcliffe Rip Dalfort, who also carried dilute. Noswal Mimi, whelped January 29, 1909, by champion Nelcote Gamine out of Noswal Coquette, bred by Mrs. Arnold Lawson of Dreamwold Kennels. Grey Brindle. Source: AKC Stud Book, Volume 28, page 938. Noswal Mimi is the first of many grey brindles owned and shown by Mrs. Arnold Lawson, and she is the first confirmed grey brindle sired by champion Nelcote Gammon, making him a carrier of dilute by default. Vanity Box, whelped February 16, 1909, sired by Blondie out of Tickle, bred by G.P. Washburn, dark grey brindle. Source: American Kennel Club Stud Book, 1911, Volume 28, page 943. Vanity Box's dam was Tickle, by Bonbeau out of Tibby, by Endcliffe Athos, out of Chartreuse. Madame Piccolo, dark brown brindle, whelped March 26, 1909, sired by champion Endcliffe Piccolo, out of Bouillet II, by Endcliffe Athos, out of Brackenside Bouillet, by champion Endcliffe Rip Dalfort. By default, Madame Piccolo's sire, champion Endcliffe Piccolo, carried the gene that makes a dark brown brindle French Bulldog Coco. Brunette, whelped April 30, 1909, brown and white, by champion Santos out of La Coquette. Champion Santos was bred and owned by the Purdy brothers, sired by Endcliffe Athos. La Coquette was sired by Giacomino out of Brownie by Leo. Parrot 5, Grey Brindle, whelped September 5, 1909, sired by Grey Brindle Athos out of Tessie H. Athos was sired by Endcliffe Athos. Tessie H was sired by Leo, son of dilute carrier Zola. Persian Blue French Bulldogs, shown at Crufts. 1910, this is the first documented photo of a blue French Bulldog, not just a grey brindle, with verified captioning describing the blue of the dog's coat.
Mrs. Allison, a dog fancier residing in Acton, England, probably possesses the oddest two bulldogs in existence. They are blue, the softest Persian blue, and this freak of nature is absolutely unaccountable as they are the offspring of French black brindles. They are valued at $7,000 and have been exhibited at many dog shows on the other side. It is expected they will be shown at the New York Dog Show this fall. Evening Bulletin, Honolulu, Oahu, Hawaii, September 28, 1910, 3:30 edition, courtesy of Library of Congress.
Not only was she a competitor at Crufts, Mrs. C.F. Allison was the French Bulldog judge at Crufts in 1909. Mrs. Allison also sold her prized blue French Bulldog, champion Halcyon Alexander, to California heiress Miss Jenny Crocker for $10,000.
Fight ends in a draw. Blooded Bulldogs separated by stream from Garden Hose, San Francisco. April 25th, one small boy, identity undiscovered, precipitated a $20,000 battle between two blue-blooded dogs of the Jenny Crocker Kennels at Hillsborough yesterday when he unleashed champion Halcyon Alexander, king of French Bulldogs, and champion Sir Barney Blue, the most perfect Boston Terrier in existence. The dogs were valued at $10,000 each. The high-priced animals fought until both were badly damaged, The keepers resorted to the use of a garden hose and forced the fighters apart. While he keepers were stopping the fight, the young instigator made his escape.
Mrs. Allison was the breeder of several other famous French Bulldogs who were related to Halcyon Alexander, such as Halcyon Diogene, Halcyon Zagazig, Halcyon Xanthippe, Halcyon Philae, Halcyon Developer, and interestingly, Halcyon Jolly. Described as weighing 21.5 pounds, Halcyon Jolly was also described in Dogdom magazine as a dark brown brindle, brother to the dam of Halcyon Alexander, Coppet Demon. Coppet Demon as sired by Napoleon Bonaparte, and a daughter of Royal Bach and Royal Beauty, named Suzanne, full sibling to Grey Brindle, Bambula. Also of interest is the paternal grandsire of Champion Halcyon Alexander, the chocolate brindle, Champion Harpton Crib. It is highly likely that the genes that create brown and gray or blue French Bulldogs was distributed throughout the Halcyon kennels, and when viewing the pedigrees of these foundation dogs, related individuals should be noted. This is the Halcyon kennel, as featured in Dogdom magazine with Champion Halcyon Alexander, front and center, the dog featured and described as Persian blue, photographed with Mrs. Allison. Take a really close look at that lower paw, particularly around the ankle. That tan point is the hallmark of blue and tan French Bulldogs, carrying one copy of AT and one copy of recessive black, referred to genetically as A. The ATA combo will often express as a deep coat color with tan points on the ankle, with shading around the toe joints. Champion, Hunk's Bequest, whelped January 2, 1910, bred by FBDCA Secretary Grant Notman, owner of his dam, then sold and shown by Mary Winthrop Turner of Never Never Land Kennels. Color, registered as dark brindle, however magazines described him as a grand red brindle. Sired by Dilute and Cocoa Carrier, Champion Nelcote Gamin, out of Dark Brown Felice by Felix II. Because his dam was dark brown, Champion Hunk's Bequest automatically inherited a copy of the gene responsible for brown French Bulldogs from her, Coco. He is also the littermate of Champion Gamin's Riquet, the winner of the FBDCA specialty in 1911.
Champion Hunk's Bequest, one of the big winners in America who arrived in England, has had nothing but success there. He won all the championships where he was presented. He is considered the best dog exported from America. He weighed 20 British pounds. His general appearance was very pleasant, but he had too many lips from the French point of view, lips that we find in all his descendants with, let us hasten to add, his total absence of a nose. It was low and compact. Whelped in 1910, his father was Champion Nelcote Gamin, the famous French dog brought to America by Goldenberg and considered the mainstay of the American breed, apart from Felice by Felix II. He had doubly, in this way, the blood of Boulot II, renamed to Champion Richelieu, son of Boulot, the French Bulldog. Its origin, its history, its breeding by Walner Comminges, 1933.
Mary Winthrop Turner was the owner of multiple champions, including 1910 and 1911 FBDCA specialty winners, Sal Volatile and Champion Pourquoi Pas. Sal Volatile was disqualified after complaints by Mrs. Lippman and Mrs. Lawson due to the fact that her dam was an English bulldog, something that was still allowed in the registry in 1910.
So, after much looking about, Sal Volatile was purchased. Miss Winthrop paid $500 for her. Sal Volatile, or Sally, is often laughingly spoken of and with great accuracy as a royal mutt. No prize matron of a distinguished kennel even had a better ancestry. Salvolatile is half a French Bulldog and half a Britisher. She is by the famous French Bull Cyrano and Peggy. It was at the specialty show of the French Bulldog Club of America at the Hotel Astor of a year ago that the Brooklyn girl made her debut with Sally falteringly entered. The pretty young woman was a little afraid. Of course Salvolatile was a splendid Frenchie, and she had the best of advice as to buying her. Advice from men who knew and could estimate points. But what could one new girl with one dog do among the thousands of beauties brought forward by people of experience? She soon found out. Salvolatile swept class after class, and was the show's great feature and surprise. The Brooklyn girl became famous at once, and then a storm arose that made her more famous. Salvolatile was protested as not being a pure French Bulldog, and therefore, not, technically speaking, eligible in the classes in which she had won. When the smoke of the battle had died away, the decision came. It was against the prize winner. Sally was disqualified, and thenceforth out of it for honors. There is a certain famous French Bulldog, Champion Nelcote Gaiman. Some have called him the greatest Frenchman in America. Though that honor really should go, most people believe, to Champion Charlemagne, whom Miss Winthrop bought at the time of the last garden show, February 1911, paying for him, it is said, $1,500. Salvolatile has been bred to Nelcote Gaiman, and in litter of very promising pups, that in time are likely to vindicate their mother, long ago arrived.
Champion Hunk's bequest sired Grey Brindle, Hunk's Tornet, whelped October 8, 1911. Bred by Mrs. Margaret Good, Hunk's Tornet was out of Tornet by Marquis out of Torn Brook Chansonet. Her maternal grandsire was Champion Encliffe Rip Dalfour, paired with Olivette, the daughter of Grey Brindle, Nini by Rip. By siring a Grey Brindle, Champion Hunk's bequest carried not only dilute, but also cocoa, which he automatically inherited from his dark brown dam. And his litter mate, Gamins Riquet, also automatically inherited the gene for brown, and is described in the media by reporters as Silver Brindle, with this post from the New York Times, Friday, April 21, 1911. Champion Gamins Riquet was the littermate to Champion Hunk's bequest, both sired by dilute cocoa carrier, Champion Nelcote Gaiman out of dark brown Felice, by Felix II. Champion Gamins Riquet won the 1912 FBDCA specialty and was up for best of breed the following year, but was placed second by Judge Mary Winthrop Turner, citing that while Riquet was a silvery brindle, a color she much preferred, the updated breed standard gave preference to dark brindles again, therefore she had to place Champion Fenway Frenchman over last year's best of breed. But like any good story worth hearing, there's more than just a cover, and we'll get to that in a moment.
Brooklyn Dog's whole show, Miss Winthrop's champion, beaten by Gamins Riquet. The French Bulldog Club of America held its special show in the sun parlor of the Hotel Astor yesterday, where 95 select specimens of the breed were benched. In the winner's class of dogs, this judge, who is Samuel L. Goldenberg of the Société Canine de Savoie, placed a totally unknown dog of local breeding over the champion Charlemagne of Amersham, a dog that has swept the boards in England, France, Belgium, Germany, and Switzerland, and in Madison Square Garden. This canine is owned by Miss Mary Winthrop of this borough, an enthusiastic patron of the French breed, and the dog that took the measure of the world's champion ribbon winner is also from Brooklyn. It is named Gamins Riquet, is now 15 months old, and is owned by Grant Notman, who is also the breeder. The Brooklyn Citizen, Friday, April 21, 1911. Page 5. Everyone who knew the history of the dogs to be judged was anxious to see how Miss Winthrop's decisions would compare with those made in previous shows, and a few of the men present who believed that a woman cannot have an unbiased opinion declared Miss Winthrop would not choose Gammons Riquet to wear the blue. The New York Times, December 3, 1911.
In this excerpt from The French Bulldog, published in 1926 by the FBDCA, the editor, O.F. Vedder, refused to acknowledge the quality of international champion, Charlemagne of Amersham, claiming that he lacked quality by American standards despite winning Best of Breed at Westminster in 1911.
The most important purchase by Mrs. Turner was Champion Charlemagne of Amersham, a dog brought from England by Charles Pelham Clinton, and first shown here under R.H. Hunt at the Westminster Show of 1911, where he won championship points and rapidly thereafter acquired additional points to make him an American champion. As he had previously gained this distinction in England and France, he became an international champion. He was of good type, as rated in England, but in no sense a remarkable specimen, as viewed by our best French Bulldog fanciers here. He was a brindle and white in color, the latter predominating, and a remarkably sound dog, but plain in head, nor did he meet expectations as a sire. Champion Hunk's bequest, however, was another exceptionally good, classy French Bulldog purchased by Mrs. Turner from his breeder, Grant Notman, and a litter brother of Champion Gammons Riquet. This dog under Mrs. Turner was made a champion, and later sold by her to Mrs. Donald Armour of London, England, where he easily won still further ring honors. Mrs. Turner was a most zealous supporter of the French Bulldogs, and largely through her efforts and those of Mr. Turner, was established the French Bulldog magazine, which did so much to popularize the breed all over the world. Her withdrawal from activity on behalf of the breed was a loss deeply regretted.
Like his famous sire, Champion Nelcote Gamin, Champion Gammons Riquet also sired a brown brindle named Gamiquet, whelped December 29, 1912. This makes Champion Gammons Riquet the 1912 FBDCA specialty winner, a carrier of the gene responsible for brown French Bulldogs, Coco. Mapledale Cleo, by Cleveland's George out of Lakeshore Brownie, by Lafayette out of Oldfields Melba, whelped April 25, 1910. Brown Brindle. Lakeshore Edmo, by Cleveland's George out of Turex Togay, whelped September 10, 1910. Gray Brindle. Notice the maternal lines pointing to Mrs. Eloise Pulsifer's lines, Ruinart. This photo of Lakeshore Edmo was featured in Dogdom magazine and shows a considerably light brindle coat. Mirth, by Encliffe Athos out of Lady Rip, by Nelcote Gammon out of Chartreuse, by Rip II out of Countess, Encliffe Athos by Peubus, by Martea de Lavallois out of Margot. Bred by the Purdy brothers. Whelped March 28, 1910. Gray Brindle. Countess Yvonne by Nelcote Blanco, out of Countess Moitars, a granddaughter of Hunk's son, the sire of Blue Brindle, Plon Plon. Whelped March 27, 1910. Gray Brindle. Source: AKC Stud Book, Volume 27, page 1024. This is the maternal grand dam of Countess Yvonne, Countess Posey. Sport Geyer, by Papouf out of Leola, by Lenoir out of Field d'Ave, by Figaro out of Mimi, Lenoir by Griffon out of Zaza. Whelped July 31, 1910, bred by Augustus McNair. Light gray brindle. Champion Noswell Nabob, by Nelcote Gamine out of Brackenside Loda, by Encliffe Athos. Gray brindle.
Champion Noswell Nabob, whelped September 18, 1910. Bred by James T. Schaffer of Malden, Massachusetts. Sold when quite a young puppy to Mrs. Arnold Lawson. First shown when 7 months of age, winning his class. From then on, he continued winning consistently. Tired of his winning career, he was retired to private pet dog life, but not until he had sired a number of notable dogs. In January 1912, Mr. Charles N. Denault of Pittsfield, Massachusetts, purchased him from the Noswell Kennels for $1,500. Under Mr. Denault's ownership, he re-entered the show ring, where he won additional honors.
One of the greatest upsets of the year was in the order of things when the champion of the Westminster Kennel Club show, Noswell Nabob, from the Lawson Kennels, was beaten by Gammon's Riquet in a special match for $500 a side, after he had disposed of champion Rip Ruinart, the property of C. Henry Smith of Butte, Montana, for a similar stake. When Riquet beat Nabob, 3 judges, William Lennox, George Brock, and S. L. Goldenberg, made the decision, with Riquet getting 2 of the 3 votes.
Brownie 2, by champion Nelcote Gammon out of Soubrette. Bred by Mary Winthrop. Whelped April 21, 1910. Grey Brindle. The dam of Brownie 2 was a daughter of Endcliffe Athos, sire of several Grey Brindles owned by the Purdy brothers, as was champion Nelcote Gammon at this point. This registration in Volume 27 is very interesting because of what Brownie 2's owner and breeder, Mary Winthrop Turner, intentionally changed in Volume 28. Mary Winthrop Turner, winner of the 1910 and 1911 FBDCA specialties and winner of Westminster 1911 French Bulldogs with international champion Charlemagne of Amersham, intentionally changed several of her dogs' registrations to make them dark brindle, such as this one of champion Mignon of Amersham, originally registered as simply Brindle, then changed for point advantage to dark brindle in Volume 28. Why would she do this, one might ask? Because Mary Winthrop Turner, who was close and collaborated with senior FBDCA members and respected global judges, had been tipped off, and that change was coming against her personally. And so she adapted. And in the case of Brownie 2, Mary Winthrop Turner changed her original registered color from a gray brindle to a dark brindle at the end of 1911, the year that Samuel L. Goldenberg convinced the FBDCA to implement changes to the breed standard regarding color. Among those changes were giving preference in points to dark brindles, once again, and now making any nose other than black a disqualification in the show ring. The timing of this change was targeted specifically toward Mary Winthrop Turner's highly celebrated import from England, international champion, Charlemagne of Amersham, who won Westminster under FBDCA President Richard Hunt. And while it doesn't always show in every light, Charlemagne of Amersham, described as a red brindle by the press who covered him at Westminster, had a very light nose leather in natural light.
Miss Winthrop, previous to the exhibition of the dog in the ring, bought him from Charles Pelham Clinton, the exhibitor, for a price close to $2,000. Charlemagne of Amersham is a red piebald brindle dog in color, mostly white. Judges of the French Bulldog said he was one of the greatest of his type ever exhibited in any country. Boston Evening Transcript, Wednesday, February 15, 1911. Page 9.
To better understand the political climate behind the 1911 standard change, it is important to mention that there were extremely hard feelings between the FBDCA and the history behind the type of ears. Rose-eared like the British toy bulldogs, or tulip-eared, now called bat-eared. When British Judge George Raper placed the rose-eared variety over the bat-eared dogs at Westminster 1897, the Americans protested in 1898 and formed their own club with their own standard, and boycotted Westminster in 1898, despite attempts to showcase both types of ears as shown in this cover from 1898. If you look closely, You can see that there are two types of French Bulldogs, and Westminster had refused to disallow the rose-eared versions from competition, instead holding two separate categories. After Judge E.D. Faulkner backed out of his assignment, George Raper was tasked once again to judge the two categories based upon the new FBDCA standard as well as the British version.
It would be unfair to ask Judge E.D. Faulkner, said John H. Buchan of the French Bulldog Club last night, to compel him to judge under a double standard, and consequently, our club has withdrawn its special prizes for the breed, but not until the Westminster Club has refused to abolish the class for the wrong type. The Waldorf Astoria show lacks the official endorsement of the American Kennel Club, but as no admission fee is to be charged, this will not disqualify the exhibitors. Meanwhile, society women who own French bulls are puzzling whether to be faithful to the old show or to take up the new one. New York Sun, January 30th, 1898, page 8.
The enormous success of the FBDCA show sparked the popularity of this breed in America, where registrations increased to a high between 1911 and 1912. The prices of these dogs were often $5,000 to $10,000 even in 1897, which would be equivalent to between $140,000 to $350,000 today.
George Raper should have known better than to carry the fire and devastation of bulldog war into your country by declining to accept the bat-eared Frenchman. But if your bulldog folks are the least little bit like ours, and if your papers will stand them, the American fancy is in for an interminable controversy which may degenerate into the most insignificant individuals being permitted by complacent editors to air their opinions by the yard and pose as the leaders of an important faction of the doggy world. On this side, a man has only to pay a price for a dog, and he becomes an authority in 30 minutes, is put up as a club judge, and if he indulges in poultry to the extent that he possesses the oof bird, is put on the committee. Then his opportunity arrives and he secures the election of his friends, his kennelmen, his grandmother, if he has one, and other reliable sources, and becomes a power in the canine circles of the day. I give all these pieces of information with the view of assisting the French Bulldog people on your side to marshal their forces in imposing array. And I further strongly advise them that if they conscientiously desire to make a splash, to insist on proxy voting being permitted, and then the man with the longest purse who can pay the subscriptions of most members, no matter how great a duffler he may be, can eventually pose as the strong man of the fancy. Mind, I don't suggest that George Raper, who is about the most independent man we have, ever lowered himself to be a tool of the log rollers. On the contrary, he has proven himself over and over again to be miles above that sort of thing. But mark my word, he has provided a fine opportunity for these gentry to display their genius. Roentgen Rays, Bitspur, 1897.
With the hostile political climate between American and British opinions, and the hotly contested chase for what would be eventually cited as the perfect breed type for this increasingly popular society breed, one must acknowledge the bias behind seemingly harmless change and all of the agendas that come with that push for change. Because change always comes with a catalyst, for better or for worse, and the French Bulldog Club of America was getting a hard press from someone with incredible amounts of money, posing themselves as an international authority at a time when facts couldn't be verified in a timely manner. And this individual, who couldn't sway his peers in France to see his vision, did not want a dog an international champion, imported from England, not carrying his kennel name, to be heralded as the poster child for French Bulldog type. Voyant de Never Never Land, Dark Grey Brindle, by Sergeant McGlinty out of Florette, by Rip out of Zizette, by Rabot de Beaubourg out of Mimi, Rip by Dick de la Mare out of Nana, owned by Mary Winthrop Turner. Whelped October 29, 1910. Ireland's Babat, dark gray brindle, sired by champion Nell Cote Gamine out of Babat, by Manomet out of Nettie, by Moore's Pompey out of Madame Agnaut. Whelped December 21, 1910. It should be noted that Manomet was a grandson of dilute carrier champion Rico. Fleur-de-Lis Madame Jarbeau, brown brindle whelped July 1, 1911. Sired by Encliffe Athos, making him now not only a carrier of dilute, but also the gene responsible for brown French Bulldogs, Coco. Beaucaire 5, owned by Charles R. Roger, breeder owner, whelped April 27, 1911. Seal brown. By solid silver brindle, Beaucaire 3 out of Seal Brindle Mazzai, granddaughter of Manomet. Booty Did of Never Never Land, dark gray brindle, whelped May 20, 1911 by Milneshaw Boulou out of Soubrette, bred by Mary Winthrop Turner. Note, half-sister Mrs. Wigglesworth is a dark gray brindle. Merluche, dark gray and white, whelped June 1, 1911, by D'Artagnan out of Edna, owned and bred by John Maydell. Notice the registration does not specify brindle, simply gray and white. D'Artagnan is a son of George and grandson of Grey Brindle, Bamboula. Merluche is also a maternal grandson of Encliffe Athos, owned by the Purdy Bros, and sire of several gray and brown offspring. Betsy II, Grey Brindle, whelped June 20, 1911, by Hebou of Milbourne out of Noisette, formerly Noswell Noisette, bred by Mrs. Arnold Lawson before being purchased by FBDCA President John Haslam. Noisette is a daughter of Grey Brindle champion Noswell Nomad, making Noisette a carrier of dilute by default, which she passed to Grey Brindle daughter, Betsy II. Princess Charlemagne, dark brown brindle, sired by champion Charlemagne of Amersham, whelped July 30, 1911, out of Gammon's Chappie by champion Nelcote Gammon, out of Rodney Peewee by Beau of Ashfield. Source, AKC Stud Book, Volume 28, page 939, bred and owned by Mary Winthrop Turner. It should be noted that the Rodney Kennels were owned by FBDCA Honorary Foundation member and renowned British Bulldog Judge Charles C. Hopton.
How dogs are shown and judged in France. Mr. C.G. Hopton awarding the championship in Griffin's Berkseois at the Société Centrale, the Kennel Club of Paris, France. Mr. C.G. Hopton, kennel editor of the Spur, has received the unique distinction of being appointed judge of this and 3 other important European exhibitions. Bit and Spur Magazine, 1913.
Baby Doll, Grey Brindle, by Bouquet's Mon Ami out of Doodles, whelped August 7, 1911, bred by Bouquet Kennels and owned by Mary Winthrop Turner. Bouquet's Mon Ami was a visibly pale son of Nelcote Blanco. Both he and Baby Doll's dam, Doodles, carried the gene responsible for gray in French Bulldogs, Dilute. Doodles was sired by Toby, by Dick de la Mare out of Leda, by Dilute carrying Rip. Nelcote Blanco was sired by Nelcote Iago, out of Nelcote Riquette, from the Nelcote Kennels owned by Samuel L. Goldenberg. Gugus 3, Brown Brindle, whelped September 21, 1911, sired by Gugus Jr. out of Juju 2. Gugus Jr. was sired by Nelcote Gugus, by Kiki by Lupi. Jojo 2 was by Rochelle Ruinart Brut, out of Whisper. Rochelle Ruinart Brut was sired by Ruinart Valois out of Odette. Bred by Mrs. H. T. Foote using Mrs. Eloise Pulsifer's stud. Rochelle Ruinart Brut, registered as a red brindle, something uncommon but definitely present in the early French Bulldog stud books, is the litter mate to Grey Brindle, Rochelle Olga. Modest Suzanne, Grey Brindle, whelped September 29, 1911, bred by George Doran, sired by Count Murphy out of Doran's Gamino Belle. Count Murphy was sired by Manomet, while Doran's Gamino Belle was a daughter of Gamino, sired by Champion Nelcote Gamine. Her maternal grandsire was Gamino, by Champion Nelcote Gamine. Mrs. Wigglesworth, dark grayish brindle, by Milneshaw Ballou out of Pomponette of Amersham, bred and owned by Mary Winthrop Turner, whelped September 29, 1911. Milneshaw Ballou was owned and shown by Mary Winthrop Turner, and featured in several photos in the press. He is sired by Kiki, a son of Dilute Carrier, Rip. He is also the maternal grandson of Mocha. Pomponette of Amersham was owned by Lord Charles S. Pelham Clinton of Woodrow High House, Amersham, England. Pomponette was bred by Mrs. W. W. Crocker of England, whelped March 28, 1900, and originally registered in Volume 27 as simply Brindle. She was later sold to Eugene Tower, and when she was re-registered, she was cited as Dark Reddish Brindle. Sired by Wuffy out of Parisiana, by Tibiers out of Fatine, by Touque out of Zita, Tibiers by Gamine out of Margot. Margot and Gamine, imported from Paris, originally owned and shown by Monsieur Ferrand. Wuffy, by Peter the Great out of L'Entente Cordiale. L'Entented Cordial sired by British stud, Syrian monarch out of Crissy. Peter the Great sired by Rabot II out of Gretel. Gretel was imported by FBDCA founding member W. W. Watrous, bred by M. von Wyman. Rabot de Beaubourg was imported from Paris to Austria by Hernier Peisecker in 1901, previously owned by Monsieur Albois, who showed and advertised him. He is sired by Rabot de Beaubourg out of Chappé, and is a grandson of Iron Grey Lupi. In one advertisement, he is described by Monsieur Albois as Gris de Fer Fonce, which translates to iron grey. Both Margot and Gammon were owned by Monsieur Ferrand, and like Rabot II, were advertised as iron grey, meaning that their offspring, Peter the Great, would be a homozygous carrier of the gene responsible for grey French Bulldogs, Dilute. Hunks Tournette, Grey Brindle, whelped October 8, 1911, bred by Mrs. Margaret Goad, sired by international champion Hunks Bequest out of Tournette. Source: AKC Stud Book, Volume 31, page 980. Tournette was shown successfully by owner Mrs. Margaret Goad in 1915, where she won first novice and reserve winners at Trenton. Because Hunks Tournette is documented as visibly Grey Brindle, her sire, international champion Hunks Bequest, is a carrier of Dilute by default. Madame Nabob, Grey Brindle, whelped November 7, 1911, bred by Robert Horn, sired by champion Noswell Nabob, a Grey Brindle, out of Chico. Chico was sired by Biss, registered in Volume 25, Mademoiselle Celeste, registered in Volume 26. BIS was by Manomet out of Nettie. Madamelle Celeste was by Bouboule Robert out of Bazetum, by Endcliffe, Rip Dalfour, out of Brackenside Charlotte, by Billion out of Lydia. Noswell Nabedi, Grey Brindle, whelped November 8, 1911. Bred by Noswell Kennels, sired by Grey Brindle, Noswell Nabob out of Juanette, AKC number 14 7002, Volume 28. Joannette was sired by Athos out of Madame de Pompadour, who was sold to Danglemont Kennel. Both Athos and Danglemont Madame Pompadour were sired by Encliffe Athos, who carried Dilute. Princess Felice, brown brindle, whelped November 28, 1911. Bred by J. O'Connor. Sired by Menelik out of Marquise II, making both parents carriers of the gene responsible for brown French Bulldogs. Coco, Menelik's dam, Fifi II, was registered as orange with a black face. Fifi II was sired by documented iron gray Rabot de Beaubourg II, by Foundation sire, Rabot de Beaubourg by iron gray Lupi. Princess Felice's dam, Marquise II, was sired by Gamin, out of Princess, by Zola out of Duchess. Zola was by Bach out of Olga. Gamin, AKC number 10-101, was owned by Jules Ferrand and bred by L. Reynaud. He was registered as a light brindle and was sired by Dilute Carrier, Rip, out of Zizette, by Rabot de Beaubourg, by Lupi out of Souris. Rennie's Rion, Dark Mouse, whelped December 2, 1910, owned by Mrs. H. M. Letton, bred by W. E. Williams. Sired by Henderson Boo Jack out of Zola Rear by Bouquet's Boulot out of Lucille III. Henderson Boo Jack was sired by Manamet out of Leola, by Leo out of Niddle. Leo was sired by Champion Rico, carrier of Dilute. Bouquet's Boulot was sired by Nelcote Iago out of Doodles. Rennie's Rion was bred to Normandy Nomad, producing Noman Rennie, a dark brindle whelped February 23, 1912. Bred by H. M. Letton and owned by Emile H. Liebberg. Napoleon VII, brown brindle, whelped December 7, 1911, bred by Walter E. Dyson. Sired by Count Boney II out of Princess Iris. Count Boney II was sired by Manamet out of Miss Babette. Princess Iris is a maternal granddaughter of Encliffe Rip Dalfort. Turco, Grey Brindle, whelped November 12, 1911, sired by Leroy II out of Maufil, by Nelcote Gamin out of Finette III. Bred by Mrs. Bradford Mitchell. Leroy III is registered as a golden brindle, sired by Taffy out of Finette, by Papouf out of Lalotte, by Buffalo out of Poupouf. Papouf was a mahogany brindle, owned by Andrew M. Tyner, bred by Monsieur Bouillot of Paris, France. Papouf was sired by Phoebus out of Rainette, by Phoebus out of Bouillot, by Brennus out of Diane. Quicksilver, whelped November 9, 1911, Grey Brindle. Sired by Pierre de Marat out of Madame Pompadour, bred by Mrs. I. Samuels. Pierre de Marat was a son of Leo, sired by Zola by Bach. Madame Pompadour was a daughter of Encliffe Athos. Trixie Bonne, brown brindle, whelped April 12, 1912, bred and owned by W. D. Foster, sired by Bon Gaiman out of Fly, by Satan out of Juno, by Athos out of Midget. Trixie Bonne was a paternal granddaughter of Champion Nelcote Gamin. On her maternal side, however, she was a granddaughter of a Rabot de Beaubourg import, owned by Mr. G. R. Nutter and bred by Louis de Vunas of Paris. Satan is described by Dogdom magazine as having a grand head and very short muzzle, is well undershot, and has perfect bat ears, cobby body, wide shoulders, screw tail, and weighs 18 pounds. In the photo published, Satan can be viewed with high tan points and a saddle area. Trixie Bonne's dam, Fly, by Satan, is registered as fawn and black. That is not to be confused with fawn with black mask, as they are totally separate patterns. It is well documented that tan points were present in the Foundation stock of toy bulldogs, as well as the use of Manchester black and tans in French stock. There are several paintings, such as those with Lady Pilkington's toy bulldogs, as well as the famous rose-eared foundation sire, Hunk. Petite Lorraine, Grey Brindle, whelped February 26, 1912, by Brackenside Rabot out of Sassy Hunk. Brackenside Rabot was a son of champion Encliffe Dalfour, while Petite Lorraine's dam, Sassy Hunk, was sired by Pony Nick out of Countess Posey. Countess Posey was a daughter of Hunk's son, who sired Blue Brindle Plon Plon. Patchouli, Grey Brindle, whelped April 18, 1912, bred and owned by John Madel, sired by Little Paulus out of Avalanche. Little Paulus was sired by Beaufils Cadet, by Beaufils, out of Romford, Adela. Beaufils was owned by Mrs. Bilborough. Avalanche was sired by Nicot, by Gamino out of Emily. Emily was also her dam, sired by Grey Brindle, Bambula. Madame Nichette, Grey Brindle, whelped April 28, 1912, bred and owned by Otto R. Kropf, sired by Champion Pourquoi Pas out of Comet. This makes the 1911 FBDCA National Specialty winner, owned by Mary Winthrop Turner, a carrier of the gene responsible for Grey French Bulldogs, Dilute. Madame Nichette's dam Comet is registered as a Red Brindle, sired by Nelcote Blanco out of Countess Moitars, sired by Pony Nick out of Countess Posey. Rowdy 2, Brown Brindle, whelped May 19, 1912, bred by William F. Reich, sired by Pourquoi Pas out of Flozetta, by Rip out of Zezette, by Rabot de Beaubourg out of Miss. This makes 1911 FBDCA Specialty winner, Champion Pourquoi Pas, owned by Mary Winthrop Turner, a carrier of the gene responsible for brown French Bulldogs, Coco. Noswal Nimrod and Noswal Nomad, registered as Grey Brindle and as Seal Brindle French Bulldogs, littermates, whelped May 5, 1912, bred by Mrs. Arnold Lawson's Noswal Kennels, sire. Grey Brindle Champion Noswal Nabob, out of QDB. Champion Noswal Nabob was sired by Champion Nelcote Gammon. Shown here with Noswal Nomad, featured in the 1926 FBDCA publication, The French Bulldog. QDB is a daughter of Champion Sikdar, sired by Champion Santos. Her dam, Zulette, was sired by Brackenside Bach out of Lady Jet. Champion Sikdar was owned by Herbert E. Young of Boston. Young was a well-known figure in French Bulldog circles in New England, member of the French Bulldog Club of New England, who piloted Sikdar, Enchantress and Sikdar Princess to championship. Like their champion Grey Brindle sire, Noswal Nabob, who won the 1912 FBDCNE Best of Breed, both Noswal Nomad and Noswal Nimrod showed extensively and successfully, including Grey Brindle Noswal Nirod, placing first winners at the Western French Bulldog Club in 1914. Mon Petit Bouchon Buddy, Silver Brindle, whelped June 16, 1912. Owned by Mrs. William Blair Corney, bred by F. D. Stoutenberg, sired by Bonbon Buddy of Never Never Land out of Daisy Rosebud, a daughter of Sousa, out of Mignon by Ruinart Valois, out of Margot. Both paternal grandsires, Champion Nelcote Gamin and Ruinart Valois sired Grey Brindles. Hugo of Milbourne, registered as Seal Brown, whelped July 7, 1912, owned by Mrs. Howard Sealers, bred by J. W. Leatherborough, by Champion Sikdar out of Suzette, by Nelcote Banquo out of Zaza, by Leo out of Fanny. Champion Sikdar was the winner at the Boston Show in 1909. Nelcote Banquo was bred by Félix Fèvre of France, owned by Nelcote Kennels, and was registered as Mahogany. Lady Fadette, Whelped November 2nd, 1912. Gray Brindle and White. By Kenneth Karma out of Queenette. By Senator out of Burgundy Blinko. By Prince Rip out of Bonifanchon. Senator by Nelcote Pitou out of Nelcote Mascot 2. Lady Fadette's sire, Kenneth Karma, was registered as a tiger brindle, often referred to as reverse brindle. He was sired by Nelcote Blanco out of Kenneth Bell Teat. Nelcote Blanco was sired by Nelcote Pitou, imported by Samuel L. Goldenberg. Sired by Champion Nelcote Fan out of Champion Nelcote Friquet. Champion Nelcote Fan was imported by Goldenberg from breeder Madame Devaux in Paris, France. Lady Fadette's maternal grandsire, Senator, was advertised by owner Dr. F. H. Williams as the smallest French Bulldog at stud. His weight was cited as 14 3/4 pounds. Gamiquette, registered as a brown brindle. December 25, 1912. Bred by Albert Seifris and owned by Mrs. Malcolm Strauss. Sired by 1912 FBDCA specialty winner, Champion Gammons Riquet out of Sabella, AKC number 169-259. Sabella was sired by Diablo II, a son of Dilute Carrier, Stainton's Niblo, out of Creole Belle, by Prince Paulus, out of Countess Zola. Countess Zola was sired by Zola out of Solid Grey, Trilby. Prince Paulus was sired by Paulus, out of Montarse. Gamiquette proves that her sire, Champion Gammons Riquet, a documented silvery or silver brindle, is carrying at least one copy of French Bulldog Cocoa, required to create her registered color of brown brindle. It should be noted, however, that Champion Gammons Riquet had no choice but to carry the gene responsible for brown French Bulldogs, by default because his dam, Felice, by Felix II, was a registered dark brown. Just brown, not brindle. There is no mistake. Lady Lou, registered seal brown and white, whelped January 2nd, 1913. Bred by Robert MacDonald of Brackenside Kennels. Sired by Brackenside Chico out of Brackenside Belle, by Brackenside Domino out of Brackenside Lorraine. Brackenside Domino by Edcliffe Piccolo out of Brackenside Blackie. Lady Ventura, Grey Brindle French Bulldog, whelped January 8, 1913. Bred and owned by George A. Smith, San Francisco, California. By Paul Roger out of Vendôme Cherie. Paul Roger, a carrier of Dilute by default having sired grey offspring, was sired by Count Paulus, out of Cher-Belle, a daughter of Champion Encliffe Ripdalfort. Vendôme Cherie, a seal brindle, was sired by Fortuna Doctuaire, by Papouf out of Dark Seal Brown, Fifine. Vinette, registered Grey Brindle French Bulldog, whelped May 16, 1913. Bred by P. Leyden, owner of Sally Hugo. Sire Tyner's Medallion, sired by Champion Nelcote Gammon out of Light Brindle, Clytie. Dam Sally Hugo, a carrier of Dilute by default having produced grey offspring, was sired by Young's Hugo out of La Duchess. Young's Hugo was sired by Manomet out of Nettie. Vinette is line-bred with grandsire on both paternal and maternal sides, Cyrano, by Endcliffe Athos, who carried Dilute. Princess Tango, registered Grey Brindle French Bulldog, whelped June 19, 1913. Bred by T.J. Little, owned by John A. Veit. By Brackenside Prince Rip out of Lady Lafayette. By Zola Jr. out of Margot. By Sardou out of Gussie. Zola Jr. by Zouave out of Nell. Princess Patty, registered Seal Brown, whelped August 5, 1913. Bred by A.J. Patterson of Westport, New York. Owned by W.O. Thomas. Sired by Niblo out of Princess Labelle. Elise, Registered Brown Brindle French Bulldog. Whelped August 29, 1913. Bred by Mrs. Ada Baker. By Beaucaire de Luxe out of Nona. By Encliffe Athos out of Jacquette. Jacquette by Champion Rip Dalfour out of Encliffe Dicka. Encliffe Athos by Phoebus out of Cosette. Beaucaire de Luxe was sired by Champion Gamin de Luxe out of Normandy, Madame du Barry, a daughter of Monson Piccolo.
Dr. F.A. Fisher purchased Champion Gamin Deluxe, litter brother to Champion Dr. Deluxe, and for years this dog headed his kennel. He was used successfully as a stud and sired many winners. Dr. Fisher was one of the founders of the Western French Bulldog Club, the third club devoted to the breed organized in America, and untiringly and most effectively worked to make it a success. During the World War, he held the rank of major in the medical department. The French Bulldog, published 1926.
Bonita II, registered as Brownish Brindle, whelped September 20, 1913. Bred by Mrs. J. R. Thibault, owned by Mrs. J. O. Lacaillade. Whelped September 20, 1913. Sired by Champion Gaiman's rival out of La Noire II.
Champion Gamin's rival was owned by Fred Poffet of La France Kennels, who went on to become FBDCA president. Poffet mated his Princess Menelik to Champion Pourquoi Pas, a breeding which resulted in producing Champion Gamin's rival and Eng Champion Pourquoi Pas rival. These two dogs, both under the 22-pound limit, were so nearly alike in conformation that they made a brace almost invincible. Gamin's rival easily acquired his championship, but Pourquoi Pas' rival was an indifferent shower and, although completing his championship, never acquired the same prominence as a show dog as his litter brother. Gamin's rival was extensively used as a stud and sired some remarkably fine specimens, such as Champion Gamin's rival Junior, Champion La France Model, Champion Coquette de Bourbon, Champion La France Model II, a France d'Artagnan, and La France Porthos, all 6 of which dogs were bred by Mr. Poffet. Of these dogs, Champion La France Model acquired his championship under the ownership of R.A. Scott. Champion Gamin's rival Junior under Hugh W. Jackson, and Ch. Coquette de Bourbon under R.H. Smith. Later, Mr. Poffet purchased Champion Gamin's rival Junior, which he still owns. His latest winning dog is Étoile de France that gained championship points at the 1925 show of the French Bulldog Club of America. Mr. Poffet has, during the last 15 years or more, produced and sold, perhaps, more dogs than any breeder in America, and his stock is now distributed in every part of the country.
Grisette III, dark gray brindle, whelped September 28, 1913, bred by Mrs. A. L. Simpson. Sired by Renee II out of Grey Brindle, daughter of Champion Nelcote Gaming. Ireland's Babette out of Babette, by Manomet out of Nettie. Lady Shampoo, AKC registered Grey Brindle French Bulldog, whelped November 5, 1913. Bred and owned by A. H. Kroger, by Prince Sikdar, out of Frenchie the Best. Lady Champo is line-bred to Manomet, who is a great-grandsire on both paternal and maternal sides. Her sire, Prince Sikdar, was written about by the French Bulldog Club of America in their publication in 1926, as follows.
B.W. Thompson has the honor of first having introduced French Bulldogs in Los Angeles, California, and has been most successful both as a breeder and in the show ring. Among his first dogs of note were Prince Sikdar by Champion Sikdar and Champion Niset by Champion Noswal Nabab, both dogs having been purchased from John E. Haslam of New York. Prince Sikdar won his championship in 5 shows on the coast and was the sire of many good litters. Mr. Thompson has been especially active in all matters pertaining to French Bulldogs in Southern California.
Champion Gammon's Reward, Dark Seal Brindle, whelped July 19, 1913. By Champion Gammon's Rival out of Marionette, by Blériot, out of Ninny, by Rip out of Flora. Owned by Ralph J. Cahan, bred by C. A. Hamilton. Gammon's Reward is line-bred to Cocoa Carrier, Champion Manelik, and has dilute carriers, such as Homozygous Carrier, Grey Brindle Nini, distributed throughout his pedigree. Notice also the distinct ankle markings on Champion Gammon's Rival. Ponto's Loony Blue Brindle, whelped January 28, 1914. By Ponto of Never Never Land, out of Ailanthus. Bred by E. A. Rickner of Kansas City, Missouri. By siring a blue brindle, this removes all doubt that Ponto of Never Never Land carried the gene responsible for blue and/or gray French Bulldogs. Dilute. Ponto was the first French Bulldog owned by Mary Winthrop Turner. Judy 3, whelped April 7, 1914. Grey Brindle. By Petite Renee out of Biscuit. Petite Renee was sired by Brown Brindle, Renee II, out of Petite Marie. Biscuit was sired by Gammon Boy out of Venus, with Gammon Boy sired by Champion Nelcote Gammon. Lady Mona, whelped April 29, 1914. Grey Brindle, sired by Romeo III out of Madame Nichette, who was also a Grey Brindle, sired by Champion Pourquoi Pas out of Comet. Romeo III was a grandson of Dilute Carrier, Zouave. Toupe, whelped August 1, 1914. Mouse Grey, by Don Petro out of Tiny, by Petro out of Trixie 2, by Billy Caesar out of Susie, Don Petro by Petro out of Name Omitted Due to Offensive Nature, by Bismarck out of Blackie. Sorry, whelped September 8, 1914. White and Brown, sired by Little Paulus out of Never Never Land Prudence. Sorry's maternal grandsire is Champion Hunk's Bequest, sired by Champion Nelcote Gammon. Budgie, whelped September 8, 1914. White and Brown. It should be noted that this is the full sibling and littermate to White and Brown's Sorry. Marmont Virgil, whelped November 18, 1914. Grey Brindle, sired by Danglemont Baron out of Gaiman's Camille and daughter of Champion Nelcote Gaiman out of the Red Widow, a daughter of Encliffe Athos. Oniga, whelped December 14, 1914. Grey Brindle, sired by Bongaman out of Pistorinos, name omitted due to offensive content, by Ferrio out of Fanny, by Toby out of Lady Bess. Ferrio by Santos out of Trixie. Mademoiselle de L. This Grey Brindle French Bulldog was whelped March 23, 1915. It should be noted that her sire is FBDCA National Champion and Best of Breed, Champion Dr. Deluxe out of Lady Milford. Both parents are, by default, carriers of the gene responsible for Grey French Bulldogs, Dilute. It should also be noted that Champion Dr. Deluxe is a littermate to Champion Noswal Nabob, who was also a Grey Brindle. It should also be highlighted that neither Champion Noswal Nabob nor his littermate, Champion Dr. Deluxe, are anywhere to be found on the French Bulldog Club of America's webpage, where they feature past specialty winners. One could theorize that the FBDCA doesn't have access to their photos. However, both are prominently featured and recognized for their immense achievements and contributions to the breed in the FBDCA's very own publication in 1926 titled The French Bulldog, making it difficult to believe that this is a casual oversight. rather a purposeful attempt to censor the history and narrative of this breed. Because there are preservationist French Bulldog breeders who would like you to believe that perhaps these colors existed, but they were far and few between. And once they were banned, they were bred out. Except that they weren't. And they weren't undesirable either, because FBDCA members and judges continued to own, show and breed gray and brown brindle French Bulldogs after Samuel Goldenberg's standard change in 1912. Goldenberg himself even chose a silver brindle for his pick for best of breed, son of a brown French Bulldog. This presentation is just a sliver of the registrations that exist in the AKC Stud books well beyond 1915. Why no one bothered to actually check these resources before now is mind-boggling, but they are there for all to see who wish to know the truth. The saturation of recessive genes for dilute, cocoa, and tan were in majority numbers, which makes sense considering the foundation stock themselves are now documented as iron gray. Just because a private club run by a handful of individuals has circulated a logo for a no-fad color campaign does not mean that this was the original intent of the very founders of this club of 127 years. When you see publications such as this, asking why gray French Bulldogs are bad, right about the time when the FBDCA instituted their no-fad color campaign, which is by all accounts a worldwide epic failure, it would seem due diligence to fact-check the sources of those who tell you that these naturally occurring colors are undesirable. With only 1% of all AKC French Bulldog litters being registered by an FBDCA member, it is clear that the term undesirable is subjective and does not seem to reflect the opinions of 99% of those who currently fancy this breed. Because history cannot be changed, only the future, and the way the past is shared, censored or not.